Have you ever tried picking up a classic literature book because you really wanted to be one of those people who read the classics and you soon realize you are never going to read that book? It is so freaking boring. And I'm currently in the process of learning how to read classic literature. I am currently in the middle of trying to read Frankenstein for the first time. It's my first classical literature book. And I really just wanted to make this video talking about some of my favorite tips and tricks on how you can learn to read classic literature. So let's just jump straight into it. So I definitely think reading summaries of books is one of the greatest tips of all. It's not uncommon for me to pick up any book I want really, and before I buy it, I will be reading a little summary about it, or I will be reading reviews and like a little description before I pick it up. Sometimes I don't do that, it really depends, but most of the time I do read a small little review, or at least I know the genre of the book. But especially when it comes to classic literature, it is so important to read a summary, especially when you are a newbie at reading classic literature, because the language is just more complex and you use a lot of words you may not fully understand. And I have two websites in mind you can use to help when it comes to this. You can either use something called Goodreads, which you can just search the book up and it'll give like a rough description of the book, and you can even read reviews. It'll say if they're spoiler free or with spoilers, so you can do that. But I definitely think Goodreads is better for your standard non-fiction books or just anything that isn't classic literature. I would still just use it for reviews and stuff like that. But another website I recently discovered is called Litcharts, and this site is great. You can pretty much just Google any and you can get like a quick summary of the book. And yes, it's technically you are reading most of the story like on like a one page, but if you really don't understand the story, it is a great way to get the summary of the book so you know what you're getting yourself into. And it's also free, so that's great. Don't stop reading. Do not be one of those people who will start the book, read one page, be like, what the fuck, I don't get this, and then put it down and never read it again. Or maybe get a couple pages in and then you're like in this annoying mid of the page where you're like, what the hell is happening? Now I have to go all the way back. Like, just finish the chapter, commit to the chapter. And you know, this also goes for any fantasy book you are currently reading, because you know, if we don't find a book very interesting, we have a tendency, you know, to not finish the chapter. Please avoid it. Please avoid it at all times. If you don't like the book, you can either just go back to the chapter and, you know, read it again later, or you can finish the freaking chapter as you should. And especially with classic literature, you should definitely do this, because it's just gonna be really confusing when you pick up the book again and you're like, what the hell is happening? Don't read at night. This is a personal tip for me, because this is more difficult to read than your standard Hunger Games book. It's just gonna be more difficult for your brain to process the words, so trying to read something as like your bedtime book is just gonna make it 10 times more difficult, and you should definitely save your classic literature for the morning or the midday or just anything else that isn't the night. Although if I'm looking down, it's because it's a kitten. You might be able to hear her. I kind of hope you will. Little purring cutie. And since I feel like classic literature is way more of educational books, it's kind of the same like you wouldn't read an educational book, like you wouldn't read any self-help books, self-development books at night, because you know, and they do require a bit more brain juice. I definitely wouldn't recommend it, and if you really want to read at night and you personally prefer reading at night, make sure it's not in that zone where you're basically falling asleep with the book and you're about to let it fall on your head. Avoid that. You can read at night. Like, if you really want to read at night, just make sure that you are not about to fall asleep. This also might make no sense, but watching a movie adaptation of the literature I think this goes very against what book people say, like you should definitely read the book before you watch the movie, and I definitely agree. Unless you already have watched the movie, I still think most books are still worth reading. Depends on who you are as a person, but especially with classic literature, if you don't understand the plot, maybe watching a movie adaptation of it. Of course it's going to be slightly different and some things are missing and some things are added. You know, that's just how it is, like with any movie really, that's not uncommon. They usually remove in movies, of course, because you know, it's really difficult to make a book into a 2-hour movie. And if you're also someone who really likes theater, you can watch a theater version of it. It really depends on you. I mean, I love theater, so I would love to see any classic literature in theater, and then you can read the book and be like, oh wow, this book is very interesting. It's like, oh, it's like how I watched it in theater. That is also a wonderful technique. write a summary. And my reasoning for deciding on this, as we all know, it is a struggle to read the book as it is. So we might as well write some small summaries each chapter. So what I mean is like you finish a chapter and you write a little summary about it. You'd say like what it was about, maybe you highlight like if they name a certain character, you'll be like, oh, that's the name of that person's brother or something like that. So you can go back and you can look, okay, that's like a quick summary of like the last 3 chapters if you fell a little bit behind in the book or just really confused what's happening. That is a great technique, and I think you can also do that for fantasy books. It is a great idea to take notes of books, especially when it comes to these kind of books like self-development, non-fiction books. I think it's a great technique for that. Again, you can do it with fiction as well, but it can kind of take like away the pleasure of reading books. So it just depends on who you are, but I definitely recommend it for classic literature. So that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, maybe you want to check out this other video I made about how to improve yourself on your self-love journey. That could be interesting for some people. I really hope you had a wonderful day, and the rest of your day will be wonderful too. Please hit that big subscribe button, like the video if you enjoyed it, and comment down below what you thought of the video. Okay, bye!